Alrighty, welcome to another Alrighty, welcome to another installment of Project Nickel and Dime. What's on tap for today?
Swapping out the 6-cylinder rear end. I'm going to put in an 8-inch, so it's going to be all nuts and bolts and U-bolts and leaf springs and all that good fun stuff. Hopefully it'll be easy and quick. Hopefully we won't have to deal with any stubborn nuts and rusted out U-bolts, and we'll see what happens.
And hopefully no trips to...
No trips to the auto parts store.
Alright, let's get started.
Alright, gotta make some room. Okay, before you start jacking up the car, loosen up those lug nuts. A lot easier to do on the ground. Make sure to chalk up those front wheels. Okay, so the idea is to jack up the car and support the weight on the frame rather than the axle or differential. Because that stuff's coming out.
Goodbye, 4-lug. So we've got the car jacked up, we got the wheels off. Now we're going to put the car back down on the frame rails with the jack stands, and then I can get underneath the car and start to loosen up everything that's connected to the rear end, the vent line, the emergency brake line, the actual hydraulic brake line, the sway bar that I put on years ago, and start to break loose the U-bolts that actually hold the axle to the leaf springs.
And the shocks.
And the shocks, thank you. Okay. Give me a rag.
Yeah. Because that's the brake line. It's gonna bleed.
Right. We're breaking loose all the brake lines here. We're gonna use some baling wire and hang them up and disconnect the junction block from the back of the axle. Previously, when we removed the transmission, I already dropped out the drive shaft, so I don't have to mess with that. What I'm doing is I'm threading the vent outlet. It also holds the bracket for the junction block for the rear brake lines. That must be my broker calling me. Hold on. That's loose. That's off. Alright, so what we're going to do next, I've got the hydraulic brake lines disconnected. I've started to remove the nut that removes the junction block that is fastened to the rear end. Now I'm going to disconnect the emergency brake cable from the lever on the inside of each drum assembly, and then I'll move on to the U-bolts for the sway bar. Brake cable, I have to disconnect the brake shoes, remove the springs, and get to the cable, which is back here on the other lever. You're gonna hear me do that. Oh, okay. So the e-brake cable is going to be back in here, so I'll get to it in a second. Connection for the e-brake cable, and this is the lever. We don't need this because these are 9-inch drums. Obviously you have a smaller diameter brake shoe, so what I'll allow it to do is disconnect this and feed it through the backing plate, and then I can be moving on. Alright, so here's a tech tip for you. Getting these prongs through the backing plate. The backing plate comes on, these prongs lock it to compress all these at the same time. Get yourself a little hose clamp. Tighten it up, compress all the tangs, and then you start to wiggle from the back, and you pull it through the backing plate just enough to clear the tangs on the back, and then you can loosen up the hose clamp, and then you can pull this right out.
But I'm sure Ford makes a special tool for that.
Oh, I'm sure they do. So So
what's the trick here?
what I got to do now is locate the top stud on the shock and keep the stud from turning while I'm loosening up the nut from the bottom on the shackle plate, on the spring plate on the rear end. Of course, it's right there. There you go, that's done. Now I'm loosening up the U-bolts for the aftermarket sway bar that I installed years ago. I have to drop this. So I can get to the rest of it.
And as always, bag and tag your parts.
Alright, so I've got the hydraulic brake lines disconnected, the emergency brake cable disconnected. I've broken free the U-bolts that hold the sway bar that I had put on years ago. The only thing I'm going to do now is break loose the actual U-bolts that hold the plates together at the leaf spring. You notice too that I have a 1-inch lowering block that I put in years ago. And once I break this all loose, then I'll work towards the back of the leaf spring because I want to replace the rear shackle bushings. So we're moving along pretty good.
Also, in that same bag of parts, leave yourself a drawing of which way things go. That way you don't have to remember, say, you know, when you reinstall it weeks later. Save yourself a headache.
Screw power tools, dude. Do it by hand.
So when you get those 4 bolts off of the U-bolts, this plate comes right off, and don't need to push the shock absorber up. It just comes right there. All that space.
Of course.
Be careful, that is a spring. Do you want that hammer?
Yeah, that'd be good. And we're off. Alright, so technically the rear end is free floating now. It's just sitting on the jack. So I can pull this out at any time. But what I want to do is drop the leaf springs because I want to replace the rear shackles with some beefed up new polyurethane bushings. These came from Energy Suspension, so definitely a stiffer ride, much needed for this car.
And once we drop that shackle, that'll give us more real estate
To drop the rear end.
for the, you know, less muscling around.
Right. Alright, so I removed the inner face of the shackle. Remove the 2 9/16 nuts. You need to make sure that you're not totally underneath this because the leaf springs are heavy. Did you remove my lowering block?
Yes.
Okay. Alright, as you can see, my earlier stock replacement and the new Energy Suspension unit. Quite a bit of difference there, isn't there?
Quite a bit of difference.
Yeah, got my money's worth out of that shackle. Now for the easy part. go.
So here's the plan. The sway bar's in the way, we don't feel like taking it out. So we're gonna move the rear end back on the jack. Then we're gonna put it up on jack stands, and then we'll lift it back onto the jack, and hopefully it will just slide right out.
Can you lift the sway bar?
Oh,
What?
I'm getting exhaust. Gas tank.
Got it?
Is the jack as low as it can be?
Got it? Okay.
It's still not going to clear. We're just going to have to muscle it.
I got it. Yeah, we have to lift it up and off the jack because there's no room.
But it's not that heavy.
Ready?
Oh, that helps.
Yeah, that helped a lot.
Small detour today. Lowering blocks on the Mustang here that been on there for 20-30 years are broken. So we had to go out and get a whole new kit, new blocks. We'll see if these are the right length. If not, we got the old ones. Maybe some new hardware. So that set us back a little bit. We'll see how much we can get done while we still have some daylight.
Yeah, let me loosen this up.
8-inch, just about ready to go in. Right?
Yep. Oh, let's just go under the swing line.
Just like we did before. Raise it up, put it on jack stands, move the jack, and we lift it over the bar.
Now we raise it up. You got it?
Yeah.
That high enough?
Oh yeah.
Good?
Yep.
There?
Yeah, that's good.
You on?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, you did pretty good today, Davis.
You did all right, man. We didn't do too bad.
Considering we started 11:30, 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock.
It's coming up on 4.
One trip to the auto parts store for lowering blocks. Mine were broken, so I got probably 22 years use out of them.
But
Might as well replace them.
yeah, but we got all the old stuff out and the new ones in place, so you can work on your Christmas break if
Absolutely.
I'm not around. but the heavy lifting part is done. It's just now putting it back
Putting the nuts
together.
and bolts back together.
So thanks for watching. Subscribe,
It's free.
and don't forget to check out the website and the podcast. Thank you.